Victoria Sterling smoothed her simple cotton dress as she watched 6-year-old Emma Blackstone build an elaborate castle with her toy blocks. The afternoon sun streamed through the massive windows of the penthouse, casting golden light across the marble floors. Victoria had been working as Emma's nanny for 3 months now, and she genuinely loved the little girl's bright spirit and endless curiosity. "Miss Victoria, do you think princesses really live in castles like this?" Emma asked, her dark eyes sparkling with wonder. Victoria knelt beside her, admiring the colorful creation. "I think princesses can live anywhere they want, sweetheart. The magic isn't in the castle, it's in the princess herself." Emma giggled and continued stacking blocks, completely absorbed in her imaginary world. Victoria couldn't help but smile. At the child's innocence, working for the Blackstone family had been a blessing after losing her previous job at the university library. The pay was generous, and Emma was the sweetest child she had ever cared for. The sound of footsteps on the marble staircase made Victoria look up. Alexander Blackstone descended with his usual commanding presence, his tall frame impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit. At 32, he was one of the youngest billionaires in the city, having built his tech empire from nothing. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his piercing blue eyes held an intensity that made Victoria's heart skip whenever he looked at her. "Good afternoon, Emma." "Victoria." His deep voice resonated through the spacious room as he loosened his silk tie. "Daddy." Emma jumped up and ran to him, throwing her small arms around his legs. Alexander's stern expression softened immediately as he lifted his daughter into his arms. "How was your day, princess?" he asked, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Miss Victoria and I built the most amazing castle, and we read 3 whole books, and she taught me how to make paper flowers." Emma's words tumbled out in an excited rush. Alexander's eyes met Victoria's over Emma's head, and she felt that familiar flutter in her stomach. "Thank you for keeping her so engaged, Victoria. I appreciate your creativity with her activities." "My pleasure, Mr. Blackstone. Emma is a joy to work with." Victoria tried to keep her voice professional, but something about the way he looked at her made her feel warm all over. After Emma went to wash her hands for dinner, Alexander approached Victoria with an unusual expression. He seemed nervous, which was completely out of character for the confident CEO she had come to know. "Victoria, I need to discuss something with you." He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture she had learned meant he was thinking carefully about his words. "Of course, Mr. Blackstone. Is everything all right with Emma?" "Emma's fine. It's about something else entirely." He walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. "There's a charity gala tomorrow night. It's for the Children's Education Foundation, and it's quite important for my business relationships." Victoria nodded, wondering where this conversation was leading. That sounds like a wonderful cause. Alexander turned back to face her, his blue eyes intense. "My usual companion for these events has had to cancel at the last minute due to a family emergency. I need someone to accompany me, and I would like that someone to be you." Victoria felt her jaw drop slightly. "I'm sorry, what?" "I'm asking you to attend the gala with me tomorrow evening." His voice was steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Mr. Blackstone, I'm not sure that's appropriate. I'm Emma's nanny, not a socialite. I wouldn't fit in at such an event." Alexander stepped closer, and Victoria caught a hint of his expensive cologne. "You're intelligent, articulate, and you have more grace than most of the people who will be there, I think. You would fit in perfectly." Victoria's mind raced. The idea of attending a high society gala was both terrifying and thrilling. "I don't have anything suitable to wear to such an event. That's already been taken care of." Alexander's lips curved into a slight smile. "I took the liberty of having a stylist select several options for you. You're being delivered this evening. You what?" Victoria's eyes widened. "Mr. Blackstone, you can't just assume I would say yes."
Ow.
"I was hoping you would say yes." His voice dropped to a lower, more intimate tone. "Victoria, I know this is unconventional, but I would very much like your company tomorrow evening." The way he said her name made her pulse quicken. Victoria had been attracted to Alexander since her first day working for him, but she had kept those feelings carefully hidden. He was her employer, a billionaire who lived in a completely different world from hers. "What about Emma?" she asked, trying to focus on practical matters. "Mrs. Henderson has agreed to stay overnight. Emma adores her." Mrs. Henderson was the elderly housekeeper who had worked for the family for years. Victoria looked into Alexander's eyes and saw something she hadn't expected. Beneath his confident exterior, there was a vulnerability, almost as if he was afraid she might reject him. "This is just for business purposes, right? To maintain appearances at an important event?" Alexander hesitated for just a moment. Of course, purely professional. But the way his gaze lingered on her face suggested there might be more to it than that. "I suppose I could help you out," Victoria said finally, her heart pounding. "But I want to be clear that this doesn't change our working relationship." Absolutely not," Alexander agreed, though his smile suggested he was pleased with her answer. That evening, after Emma was tucked into bed, Victoria stood in her small apartment, staring at the 3 elegant gowns that had been delivered. Each one was more beautiful than the last, in rich jewel tones that would complement her auburn hair and green eyes. There were also matching shoes, jewelry, and even lingerie that made her blush. She chose a deep emerald green dress that hugged her curves perfectly while maintaining an air of sophistication. The stylist had also included a note about hair and makeup, offering to send someone to help her prepare. As Victoria hung the dress carefully in her closet, she couldn't help but wonder what she was getting herself into. Alexander Blackstone was dangerous to her peace of mind in the best of times. Spending an entire evening with him, dressed in a gown that made her feel like a princess, seemed like a recipe for trouble. But as she thought about the way his eyes had softened when he asked her, the hint of vulnerability she had glimpsed beneath his commanding exterior, Victoria realized she was more excited than nervous. The next evening arrived faster than Victoria had expected. She spent the afternoon in a salon, being pampered in ways she had never experienced. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo with soft tendrils framing her face, and her makeup was applied with professional skill that enhanced her natural beauty without making her look artificial. When she finally slipped into the emerald dress, Victoria barely recognized herself in the mirror. The gown transformed her from a simple nanny into someone who looked like she belonged in Alexander's world. Alexander arrived at her apartment building in a sleek black limousine, felt her breath catch when she saw him step out to greet her. He wore a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean physique. His dark hair was styled impeccably. His blue eyes seemed even more intense than usual. When he saw her walking toward him, Alexander stopped, breathing for a moment. Victoria looked absolutely stunning, but more than that, she carried herself with a natural elegance that couldn't be taught. "You look breathtaking," he said softly, taking her hand to help her into the limousine. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself," Victoria replied, trying to keep her tone light despite the way her heart was racing, as they settled into the plush interior of the limousine. Alexander poured 2 glasses of champagne from the built-in bar. "To surviving the evening," he said with a wry smile. "To not embarrassing ourselves," Victoria countered, clinking her glass against his. The drive to the hotel where the gala was being held gave them time to go over the basics. Alexander briefed her on some of the important people who would be there and the work of the Children's Education Foundation. "Just be yourself," he advised, as they pulled up to the red carpet entrance. "You're more impressive than you realize." Victoria felt a surge of nervousness as she saw the photographers and the elegantly dressed crowd. "Are you sure about this?" Alexander squeezed her hand gently. "I'm sure. Trust me." As they stepped out of the limousine and onto the red carpet, Victoria was amazed by how natural it felt to have Alexander's strong arm supporting her. The photographers called out his name and flashbulbs went off around them, but Alexander's steady presence kept her calm. "Mr. Blackstone, who is your lovely companion this evening?" one reporter called out. "This is Victoria Sterling," Alexander replied smoothly. "She works with children's education initiatives." It wasn't exactly the truth, but it wasn't a lie either. And Victoria appreciated how he had made her sound. It's important without making her feel like she was living a complete fabrication. As they entered the ballroom, Victoria was overwhelmed by the opulence. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the room was filled with the city's elite, all dressed in their finest attire. But with Alexander's hand resting lightly on her back, guiding her through the crowd, Victoria found herself relaxing and actually beginning to enjoy the experience. Alexander, sophisticated woman in her 50s, approached them with a warm smile. "How wonderful to see you, Mrs. Patterson. Allow me to introduce Victoria Sterling." "Victoria, this is Catherine Patterson, the Foundation's president." Victoria extended her hand with a genuine smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Patterson. The work your foundation does is truly inspiring." "How kind of you to say so. Are you involved in education yourself, dear?" "I work with children, yes. I believe every child deserves access to quality education regardless of their circumstances." Victoria spoke from the heart, and she could see that Mrs. Patterson was genuinely impressed by her sincerity. As the evening progressed, Victoria found herself in conversation after conversation with fascinating people. Alexander stayed close by her side, but she noticed that he seemed more relaxed than she had ever seen him. When she complimented a businessman's wife on her charity work, or asked thoughtful questions about various initiatives, Alexander watched her with something that looked very much like pride. During dinner, they were seated at a table with several other couples. Victoria contributed to the conversation naturally, sharing insights about child development and learning that impressed everyone present. She noticed Alexander watching her with an intensity that made her skin warm. "You're a natural at this," he murmured in her ear during a lull in conversation. "I'm just being myself, like you suggested," she whispered back, very aware of how close his lips were to her ear. When the dancing began, Alexander stood and offered her his hand. "May I have this dance?" Victoria's heart fluttered as she placed her hand in his and allowed him to lead her onto the dance floor. The moment his arms came around her, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. They moved together perfectly, as if they had been dancing together for years. Alexander was an excellent dancer, leading her confidently through the steps while holding her close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. "Thank you for tonight," he said quietly as they swayed to the music. "You've been perfect." "Thank you for asking me," Victoria replied, looking up into his blue eyes. "I never imagined I could feel so comfortable in a place like this." "You belong here," Alexander said, his voice serious. "You belong anywhere you choose to be." The intensity in his gaze made Victoria's breath catch. For a moment, it felt like they were the only two people in the room. The professional boundaries she had tried to maintain were crumbling under the weight of the attraction she felt for this complex, fascinating man. As the song ended, Alexander didn't immediately release her. They stood there for a moment, lost in each other's eyes, until the reality of where they were intruded. "We should probably rejoin the others," Victoria said reluctantly. Probably, Alexander agreed, but he made no move to step away from her. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversation, laughter, and stolen glances between Victoria and Alexander. By the time they returned to the limousine, Victoria felt like she was living in a dream. "That was incredible," she said as they settled into the plush seats. "I can't believe how welcoming everyone was." "They responded to your genuine warmth," Alexander said. "You have a gift for making people feel heard and valued." Victoria felt herself blushing under his praise. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity. It was truly magical." Alexander reached over and took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Victoria, I need to tell you something." The serious tone in his voice made her look at him with concern. "What is it?" "Tonight wasn't just about business for me." His thumb stroked gently across her knuckles. "I asked you to come with me because I wanted to share this with you specifically." Victoria's heart began to race. "Alexander, I know it's complicated because of our working relationship, but I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is purely professional." The limousine pulled up to Victoria's apartment building, but neither of them moved to get out. The air between them was charged with tension and possibility. "I feel it too," Victoria admitted quietly. "But this is dangerous territory for both of us." Alexander lifted their joined hands and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. some things are worth the risk. Victoria woke the next morning with the events of the gala, feeling like a beautiful dream. She could still feel the warmth of Alexander's hand in hers, and the way his eyes had looked at her with such intensity. But in the cold light of day, reality began to set in. She was Emma's nanny, and Alexander was her employer. No matter what had passed between them the night before, they still had to navigate their professional relationship. She arrived at the penthouse that morning feeling nervous and unsure of what to expect. Would Alexander pretend nothing had happened? Would things be awkward between them? She let herself in with her key and found Emma in the kitchen with Mrs. Henderson, chattering excitedly about the pancakes they were making. "Miss Victoria." Emma rushed over to hug her. Mrs. Henderson said, "You went to a fancy party with Daddy. Did you wear a princess dress?" Victoria laughed, some of her tension easing at Emma's enthusiasm. "I did wear a very pretty dress. Your daddy looked very handsome in his tuxedo." "I want to see pictures," Emma demanded. "Maybe later, sweetheart. Right now, how about we finish those pancakes?" Mrs. Henderson, a kindly woman in her 60s, gave Victoria a knowing smile. "Mr. Blackstone left early for the office, but he asked me to tell you he'd like to speak with you when he returns this afternoon." Victoria nodded, trying to ignore the flutter of anticipation in her stomach. She spent the morning focused entirely on Emma, taking her to the park and then working on art projects. But underneath her normal activities, she couldn't stop thinking about Alexander and what he might want to discuss. Emma was napping when Alexander returned home that afternoon. Victoria was in the living room, reading a book, while keeping an ear out for any sounds from Emma's room. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, and immediately felt that familiar surge of attraction. He had loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, looking slightly less formal than usual, but no less handsome. His dark hair was a bit mussed, as if he had been running his hands through it, and there were lines of tension around his eyes. "How was Emma today?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her. "Wonderful as always. She wanted to see pictures from the gala." Victoria closed her book and set it aside. "I told her maybe later." Alexander nodded, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Victoria, about last night." "I know," she said quickly. "It was a one-time thing. We got caught up in the atmosphere of the evening, but we both know it can't happen again." Alexander looked at her for a long moment, his blue eyes unreadable. "Is that what you want?" The question hung in the air between them. Victoria felt her, heart racing as she struggled to find the right answer. What she wanted and what was sensible were two very different things. "It doesn't matter what I want," she said finally. "I work for you. Emma depends on me. I can't risk my job for." "For what?" Alexander leaned forward slightly. "For something that probably doesn't mean as much to you as it does to me," Victoria finished quietly. Alexander was quiet for so long that Victoria began to wonder if she had offended him. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "Victoria, may I tell you something about my life?" She nodded, curious about this more vulnerable side of him. "Emma's mother and I were married for 3 years. It was arranged. By our families, a merger of 2 business dynasties, more than a love match." Alexander stared out the window as he spoke. Rebecca was beautiful, sophisticated, and completely uninterested in being a mother or a wife. She died in a car accident when Emma was 2. Victoria felt her heart clench with sympathy. "I'm so sorry." The truth is, Rebecca and I were already living separate lives by then. She had her social circle and her charity committees, and I had my work. Emma was raised primarily by nannies. Alexander's jaw tightened. "I swore after Rebecca died that I would never again enter into a relationship based on social expectations or business advantages." Victoria wasn't sure what to say this. Glimpse into Alexander's past explained so much about his careful, controlled demeanor. "Last night was the first time in years that I felt like I was with someone who saw me as more than just my net worth or my social status." Alexander looked directly at her. "You spoke to people about things that mattered to you, not because you were trying to impress them or gain something from them. You were genuine in a world where genuine is rare." "I was just being myself," Victoria said softly. "Exactly." Alexander stood up and walked to the window. Do you know what Emma told Mrs. Henderson this morning? Victoria shook her head. She said she hopes you marry me so you can be her real mommy. Alexander turned back to face her, out of the mouths of babes. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Alexander, I adore Emma, but you have to know that's not why I know, he crossed the room and knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. Victoria, I'm falling in love with you, not because you're good with Emma, though you are. Not because you fit perfectly into my world, though you do. I'm falling in love with your kindness, your intelligence, your strength, and the way you make me want to be a better man. Victoria stared into his eyes, seeing nothing but sincerity there. This is crazy. We barely know each other. And let's get to know each other, Alexander said. Really know each other, not as employer and employee, but as a man and a woman, who are attracted to each other. And if it doesn't work out, what happens to my job? What happens to Emma? Alexander squeezed her hands gently. I can't promise it will work out, but I can promise that no matter what happens between us personally, your relationship with Emma won't suffer. She needs you, and I would never take that away from her, or from you. Victoria looked into his eyes and saw the truth there. This wasn't a casual proposition or a rich man's whim. Alexander was offering her his heart, and she realized that somewhere along the way he had already captured hers. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Let's see where this goes. Victoria smiled, feeling a surge of courage. But I have conditions. Alexander's eyebrows rose. Such as, Emma comes first. Always. If at any point this relationship starts to affect her negatively, we stop. Agreed. And I want to take this slowly. I'm not Rebecca. I don't know how to navigate your world, and I need time to figure out if I even want to. Understood, Alexander. Brought her hands to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her palms. Anything else? Just one more thing? Victoria leaned forward slightly. I want you to kiss me. Right now, while I still have the courage to ask. Alexander's eyes darkened with desire. Released her hands and cupped her face gently, his thumbs. Stroking across her cheekbones, are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Victoria breathed. When Alexander's lips met hers, Victoria felt like she was coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, a tentative exploration, but when she responded by wrapping her arms around his neck, he deepened it. His lips were warm and firm, and he tasted like coffee and something uniquely masculine that made her head spin. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Alexander rested his forehead against hers, his hands still cupping her face. I've wanted to do that since the day you walked into this house, he admitted. I've wanted you to, Victoria confessed. They were interrupted by the sound of Emma calling. From her room, Victoria and Alexander sprang apart, both of them feeling like teenagers caught by their parents. I should go check on her, Victoria said, her lips still tingling from the kiss. Victoria Alexander called as she reached the doorway. Do you have dinner with me tomorrow night, just the two of us? Victoria's smile lit up her entire face. I'd love to. That evening, after Emma was in bed, Victoria and Alexander sat in his study talking. He showed her photos from his childhood, told her about building his first computer at age 12, and shared his dreams for expanding his company's educational technology initiatives. Victoria told him about growing up in a small town with her grandmother after her parents died, about working her way through college, and about her dream of someday opening a school for underprivileged children. You could do that, you know, Alexander said seriously. With the right backing, you could start your own educational foundation. Someday, maybe, Victoria said. Right now I'm focused on Emma and figuring out what's happening between us. Alexander reached over and took her hand. What's happening between us is that we're falling in love. Everything else we'll figure out as we go. The next few weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and growing intimacy. Alexander and Victoria began having dinner together after Emma was in bed, talking late into the night about everything and nothing. He took her to quiet restaurants where they could focus on each other rather than being seen. And she introduced him to simple pleasures like picnics in the park and morning walks. Emma, in her innocent way, seemed to sense the change in the atmosphere. Between the adults in her life, She began asking Victoria to read bedtime stories to both her and her daddy. And she started planning elaborate tea parties where Victoria and Alexander would have to sit together and pretend to drink imaginary tea from tiny cups. I think she's trying to play matchmaker. Victoria laughed one evening as they cleaned up after a particularly elaborate wedding ceremony between Emma's dolls. She's very wise for her age, Alexander agreed, pulling Victoria into his arms. She knows a good thing when she sees it. Their first real date was dinner at an intimate French restaurant where Alexander had reserved a private dining room. Victoria wore a simple black dress that made her auburn hair glow like fire, and Alexander couldn't take his eyes off her. "You're staring," Victoria said with a soft smile. "I can't help it. You're beautiful." Alexander reached across the table to take her hand. "I love watching you discover that you can fit into any world you choose." "I'm still learning," Victoria admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I'm playing dress-up." "You're not playing anything. You're becoming who you were always meant to be." Alexander brought her hand to his lips. "I see your strength, your intelligence, your compassion. Those things don't change based on what dress you're wearing or what restaurant we're in." As the evening progressed, Victoria found herself opening up to Alexander in ways she never had with anyone else. She told him about her fears of not being good enough for his world, about her dreams of making a difference in children's lives, and about how falling in love with him scared and thrilled her in equal measure. "I love you," Alexander said quietly. As they shared dessert, "I know it's soon, but I need you to know that what I feel for you is real and deep and permanent." Victoria felt tears spring to her eyes. "I love you too. I tried to fight it because it seemed impossible, but I can't." "Anymore?" Alexander came around the table and pulled her up into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made her forget they were in a restaurant. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Take me home," Victoria whispered against his lips. "Your home or mine?" Alexander asked, his voice rough with desire. "Yours," Victoria said decisively. "It's already starting to feel like home to me." 3 months later, Victoria's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. What had started as a fake relationship for appearances had evolved into something deeper and more real than either she or Alexander had expected. She still worked as Emma's nanny officially, but the lines between her professional and personal life had blurred beyond recognition. Alexander had been true to his word about taking things slowly, but the passion between them had been impossible. To deny their first night together had been a revelation of tenderness and desire that left Victoria feeling cherished and desired in ways she had never experienced. Alexander was an attentive and generous lover who seemed to find as much pleasure in her responses as in his own satisfaction. "Daddy, can Miss Victoria wear a white dress like the princess in my book?" Emma asked one morning over breakfast, looking between her father and Victoria with the kind of innocent hopefulness that made both adults' hearts skip. Victoria nearly choked on her coffee while Alexander cleared his throat diplomatically. "What? Kind of white dress, princess? A wedding dress? Then she could be my real mommy and live here forever and ever." Victoria and Alexander exchanged a look over Emma's head. They had been dancing around the subject of their future for weeks, both afraid to push too hard or move too fast, despite the intensity of their feelings. "Sweetheart," Victoria said gently, "sometimes grown-ups need lots of time to make big decisions like that." "But you love each other, right?" Emma persisted with 6-year-old logic. "And you love me too, Miss Victoria?" "Very much," Victoria confirmed, her heart melting at the hope in Emma's eyes. "Then what are you waiting for?" Emma asked, with the kind of straightforward wisdom that only children possess. Later that day, while Emma napped, Alexander found Victoria in the garden reading. She looked up when his shadow fell across her book, shielding her eyes from the sun with her hand. "Emma has a point," he said without preamble, settling beside her on the garden bench. "About what?" Victoria asked, though she suspected she knew. "What we're waiting for." Alexander took the book from her hands and set it aside, then captured her hands in his. "Victoria, I know we agreed to take things slowly, but I'm tired of pretending this is anything less than permanent for me." Victoria felt her heart begin to race, Alexander, I want to marry you, he continued, his blue eyes intense with emotion. I want to adopt you officially as Emma's mother if you'll let me. I want to build a life with you that's real and lasting and everything we both deserve. Victoria stared at him, overwhelmed by the depth of her own longing. It's terrifying how much I want that too. Then what's holding us back? Victoria looked down at their joined hands, struggling to put her fears into words. Your world, Alexander. The business community. The social expectations. I'm still just a nanny who got lucky enough to catch your attention. People will always see me that way. Alexander lifted her chin with his finger, forcing her to meet his eyes. Do you remember what you told Emma about princesses living anywhere they want, because the magic is in the princess herself? Victoria nodded, remembering. The conversation from months ago. The magic is in you, Victoria. Your kindness, your strength, your ability to love completely and fearlessly. That's what makes you extraordinary, not a title or a bank account. Alexander's voice was fierce with conviction. Anyone else thinks I only care what you think? I think, Victoria said slowly, that I'm tired of being afraid. I think I want to marry you and be Emma's mother and build something beautiful together. Alexander's smile was radiant as he pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. I was hoping you'd say that. Victoria gasped when he opened the box to reveal a stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds. It's the same color as the dress you wore to our first gala, Alexander explained. The night I knew for certain that you were going to change my life. Yes, Victoria whispered before he could even ask the question. Yes, I'll marry you. Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly with emotion, then pulled her into his arms for a kiss that tasted like promises and forever. Their wedding 6 months later was everything Victoria had never dared to dream of. Alexander had wanted to give her the full society wedding with hundreds of guests. But Victoria had convinced him that what mattered was not the size of the celebration, but the meaning behind it. They were married in the garden of Alexander's estate, surrounded by close friends and family. Victoria wore a simple but elegant gown that made her look like a fairy tale princess, and Emma served as flower girl in a dress that matched Victoria's. Do you, Alexander, take Victoria to be your wife, to love and cherish her in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for as long as you both shall live? I do, Alexander said, his voice strong and clear as he looked into Victoria's eyes. Do you, Victoria, take Alexander to be your husband, to love and honor him in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for as long as you both shall live? I do, Victoria replied, her voice filled with joy and certainty. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Alexander's kiss was gentle and reverent, a promise of all the tomorrows they would share together. During the reception, Victoria found herself surrounded by well-wishers and new friends from Alexander's business world. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, she felt confident and at home. She had learned that authenticity was more valuable than artifice, and that her genuine care for others was her greatest asset in any social situation. You did it, Alexander murmured in her ear as they swayed together during their first dance as husband and wife. You conquered them all with nothing but your beautiful heart. We did it, Victoria corrected. Together. Emma's adoption was finalized a month after the wedding, making Victoria officially her mother in the eyes of the law, as well as in their hearts. The little girl had never been happier, finally having the complete family she had longed for. Mommy, Emma said one evening as Victoria tucked her into bed, I'm glad Daddy found you. I'm glad he found me too, sweetheart, Victoria replied, smoothing Emma's dark hair back from her forehead. You think you'll have a baby brother or sister for me someday? Victoria's cheeks flushed pink. She and Alexander had been trying for a baby for the past few months, though they hadn't shared that information with Emma yet. Would you like that? Victoria asked. Oh yes, I could help take care of the baby and teach them everything I know. Victoria smiled and kissed Emma's forehead. Sweet dreams, my darling girl. Later that night, as Victoria and Alexander lay entwined in their bed, she told him about her conversation with Emma. She wants a sibling, Victoria said, tracing lazy patterns on Alexander's chest. And what do you want? Alexander asked, his hand stroking through her hair. I want to give you everything, Victoria said softly. More children, a lifetime of love, whatever happiness we can create together. Alexander rolled over so he was, looking down at her, his eyes dark with love and desire. You've already given me everything that matters. You gave me yourself, and you gave Emma a mother who loves her unconditionally. Everything else is just a bonus. I love you, Victoria whispered, pulling him down for a kiss that quickly deepened into something more passionate, as Alexander made love to her with the tender intensity that never failed to take her breath away. Victoria marveled at how completely her life had changed. From a simple nanny trying to make ends meet to the beloved wife of a billionaire and mother to the sweetest little girl in the world, her journey had been beyond anything she could have imagined. What are you thinking about? Alexander asked. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through their bedroom windows. Just how lucky I am, Victoria replied honestly. How did I get so fortunate? Luck had nothing to do with it, Alexander said firmly. You earned every bit of happiness you have. Your strength, your love, your refusal to let anyone make you feel less than you are. That's what brought us together. Victoria smiled and snuggled, closer to her husband's warmth. I used to think fairy tales weren't real. What do you think now? I think we make our own fairy tales, Victoria said softly. With love, courage, and a little bit of magic. 6 months later, Victoria stood in front of the mirror in their master bedroom, her hand resting on the gentle curve of her growing belly. At 4 months pregnant, she was just beginning to show, and the knowledge that she was carrying Alexander's child filled her with a joy so profound it sometimes brought tears to her eyes. Mommy, are you ready? Emma called from the doorway, practically bouncing with excitement. Today was the grand opening of the Victoria Sterling Blackstone Foundation for Children's Education. The fulfillment of Victoria's dream to create educational opportunities for underprivileged children. Almost, sweetheart, Victoria replied, smoothing her elegant navy dress over her bump. Alexander had insisted on the foundation bearing her name, saying that the work was her vision and her passion. Alexander appeared behind Emma, devastatingly handsome in his charcoal suit. His eyes met Victoria's in the mirror, and the love she saw there still made her heart skip after more than a year of marriage. You look radiant, he said, coming up behind her to wrap his arms around her waist, his hands settling protectively over their unborn child. I feel like I'm dreaming, Victoria admitted. A year and a half ago, I was struggling to pay rent. Now I'm married to the most wonderful man in the world. I'm Emma's mother, we're expecting a baby, and I'm about to open my own foundation. Dreams do come true, Alexander murmured against her ear, especially for people brave enough to believe. They deserve them. The foundation's opening ceremony, was everything Victoria had hoped for, and more. The converted warehouse had been transformed into bright, welcoming classrooms equipped with the latest educational technology. There would be after-school programs, tutoring services, computer classes, and scholarship opportunities for children who needed them most, as Victoria addressed the crowd of donors, community leaders, and families who would benefit from the foundation's services. She felt a profound sense of purpose and fulfillment. Education isn't just about learning facts or passing tests, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. It's about giving children the tools to dream bigger than their circumstances and the knowledge that they have the power to shape their own futures. The applause was thunderous, but what meant the most to Victoria was seeing Alexander's proud smile and Emma's excitement as she cut the ribbon to officially open the foundation. Later that evening, at home with just their small family, Victoria reflected on how perfectly her life had fallen into place. Emma was thriving in school and had adjusted beautifully to having Victoria as her official mother. The pregnancy was progressing smoothly, and both she and Alexander were over the moon about adding to their family. Daddy, Emma said as they sat together on the couch after dinner, when the baby comes, will you still have time to read me stories? Alexander pulled his daughter onto his lap, his expression serious. Emma, having a new baby doesn't mean we'll love you any less or spend less time with you. It just means our family will be bigger and there will be more love to go around. Victoria added, settling beside them with her hand on her belly, you're going to be the best big sister in the world. This baby is going to be so lucky to have you. Emma beamed with pride and leaned over to whisper to Victoria's bump. "Hi, baby. It's your big sister, Emma. I can't wait to meet you and teach you all the important things, like how to build the best blanket forts and why chocolate ice cream is better than vanilla." Alexander and Victoria exchanged amused looks over Emma's head. Their daughter was going to be an amazing big sister. That night, as they prepared for bed, Alexander helped Victoria out of her dress with the careful tenderness he had shown ever. "Since learning about the pregnancy, how are you feeling?" he asked, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Perfect," Victoria said honestly. "Tired, but perfectly happy." Alexander turned her in his arms and knelt down, so he was eye level with her belly. "Hello, little one," he said softly, pressing a gentle kiss to the curve. "Your mommy had a very big day today, and you should be proud of her. She's going to change so many children's lives with her foundation." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes at the tenderness in his voice. "You're going to be an amazing father to this baby, just like you are to Emma." "I'm going to try my best," Alexander said, standing and pulling her into his arms. "With you by my side, I feel like I can do anything." As they settled into bed together, Victoria marveled at the completeness of her happiness. In Alexander's arms, with Emma sleeping peacefully down the hall and their unborn child growing inside her, she felt like the luckiest woman in the world. "Alexander," she whispered in the darkness. "Oh, thank you." "For what?" "For seeing something in me that I didn't even see in myself. For believing I could be more than just a nanny. For giving me a family and a purpose and a love I never dared to dream of." Alexander's arms tightened around her. "Thank you for saying yes to that first gala invitation. Thank you for taking a chance on a workaholic billionaire who didn't know what he was missing until you walked into his life. Thank you for loving Emma and me so completely. Always," Victoria promised, sealing the vow with a kiss that tasted like forever. 6 months later, Victoria gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named James Alexander Blackstone. Emma was immediately smitten with her baby brother, insisting on helping with everything from diaper changes to feeding time. As Victoria watched Alexander cradle their son, while Emma read him a story about brave princesses and kind dragons, she knew that their fairy tale was just beginning. They had built something beautiful together, a family founded on love, respect, and the unshakable belief that with courage and compassion, any dream could come true. The foundation continued to grow and thrive, touching hundreds of children's lives each year. Victoria split her time between running the organization and being a devoted mother. With Alexander's unwavering support making it all possible, years later, when people asked Victoria about her incredible journey from nanny to philanthropist to beloved wife and mother, she would always smile and say the same thing. "I learned that the most important qualification for any role in life isn't your background or your bank account. It's the size of your heart and your willingness to love without limits." Blackstone household, where laughter echoed through the halls and love was the foundation of everything they built together. That truth was evident every single day.